Right, so it looks like we're good and recording. All right, so hello everybody. I'm Mango Thunderslice. I'm here with Joe Stewart again, and we're going to talk about the impeachment proceedings going on. It's we've been meaning to do some calls over the last several weeks. We actually did a debate over gun control for about an hour, a really in-depth debate, and then we had realized we had technical difficulty, and the file was completely useless. So. Yeah, basically, we're just restarting it. Joe, how are you doing?
Doing good, but how are you?
I'm doing all right. I just this whole thing from my perspective is so insanely ridiculous. And ever since the mandatory vaccine bill in California out here, I find myself tempting to really hate the other side. And I don't want to be in that position. I want to I don't want to be bogged down on that. It's just so insane to me. But so I figured, you know, for content on the channel as well as just basically for my own therapeutic sanity and health, I figured we just have this conversation and basically, I know you don't even necessarily describe yourself as a liberal per se, but a left-leaning centrist. And I
Yeah.
just kind of wanted to hear your take on it and basically discuss this with somebody rather than just stewing on it, just keep the energy moving, so to speak. So yeah, basically I'll just let you kind of run with it for a bit and we'll start the conversation from there.
Yes. It is a tad bit of insanity. I read through just recently. I read through the transcript of the conversation that they had, and I don't see anything weird or crazy in there. I think this is just a desperate move by the Democrats to, for some reason, they keep wanting to agitate this person, Donald Trump, the president, and they hope to get something out of it. Most of the time, it keeps blowing up in their faces. I think this is one of those times as well. Uh, I don't know if this was intentionally done. See, sometimes I think either Trump is a master at his craft, uh, or a Don Quixote, just on a quest for something that's not necessarily there, and keeps, things keep blowing up in his face, but the chips land to his favor almost all the time. And this is just one of those times. I don't think there's an impeachment situation here. At the end of the day, let's just say it does go all the way through. It'll pass through the House and fail at the Senate. Trump will claim this as a victory, and he's really good at winning these small battles for the war. And I think I don't know if I'm starting to admire the guy a little bit slowly at his craft. Do I like him? No. Do I think he's a good president? Absolutely not. But do I feel like he knows his craft? It's starting to get to me. So that's really my thoughts on this matter.
Oh yeah, and it's like it gives rise to the 3D chess and the 4D chess and the 5D chess narratives that basically, is he really as bumbling as he appears to be, or is this all very methodical? And
Right.
I'm not entirely sure myself at this point, but I also give him credit for seemingly making his way through. And it was just interesting to me because we had literally 2.5 years of the Mueller report, right? And that was the whole premise of impeachment the entire time. And it was really like building up, and people were really, into it. And there was this whole narrative and storyline. Whether or not you believe in it is one thing, but there was at least that momentum and that info. And now it's almost like somebody heard something about a call with Ukraine, and then all of a sudden, all right, impeachment, bam, let's go. It's like, wait, don't we have to find out what happened first? Like, isn't that part of the process? Or are we just skipping that from now on? Just allegations are all that it takes, and that's just kind of what really strikes me about this is that it's like, and even when he released the transcript, and they're like, no, the transcript doesn't matter. We want the second hand, third hand account of the call. That's what really matters. It's like, wait a minute. I thought the primary source document is the most important, but it's really strange. I don't really understand what the whole point of it is, other than to just delay and obstruct. Not, I don't know, obstruct, but just to delay and like distract rather. because obviously, like you alluded to, it's not going to make it through the Senate. And Nancy Pelosi was very averse to this for the last couple of years, and now all of a sudden she's just basically walking around with this big, like, cartoonish gavel, like,
Yeah.
and basically wielding the power around. But so you at least agree that this is a little strange, and you're somebody who actually believes, in the substance of the Mueller report, correct?
I do. I think the Miller report had a lot more merit. I don't think it was properly executed as it should have. But I went through that almost religiously, and there's definitely a lot more merit to the Mueller report than there is to this nonsense. This is simply nonsense. Although I could see Trump using, from what I found out, he did hold back military aid for 3 or 4 times it was asked of him, and he held it back. And then as he is giving the military aid, he's asking for something in return. But I don't see anything wrong with that, even though he's asking for someone to be investigated. Now, I could see the side where they're saying, at the time the phone call took place, Joe Biden was the front runner. It could have gotten Trump worried, and he tried to, figure something out. I could see that argument, but I don't know if it's an impeachment situation. What are your thoughts on that?
It's like, it's kind of the thing with, the like Manafort is like, he was like, he technically is guilty of a crime, right? But it's almost more of a procedural crime. And in the case with Trump, I don't even see what the supposed crime is, right? Leveraging, like soft power, and just political leverage on another country is not a crime. It's not a crime at all.
I don't think it
It's
is.
standard. And I wouldn't even say that, based on at least the transcript of the call, it's about as friendly a call as I could even imagine. But
Right,
it's interesting because there's no quid pro quo. There was no like do this or else, right?
right.
Whereas on the other hand, like what is supposedly Biden didn't do anything at all. What he did was absolutely a quid pro quo. It was basically you basically fire this chief prosecutor from investigating the company that my son works at, or I'm going to basically withhold $1 billion in subsidies and aid to your country. Like that, and he's like, but you're not the president. He's like, call Barack Obama. He was bragging about it at
Well,
the
yeah,
Council on. You've seen that video, right?
I have, and that's very interesting that they would even try to stir this situation up when there's that situation. Is simply him bragging about billions of dollars being withheld for not firing a prosecutor at the time was investigating the company of that Hunter Biden was sitting on the board of, if I'm not mistaken. So, their defense is it was the international community and Biden and the United States that wanted that corrupt prosecutor to be fired. I don't know how strong of a defense that is. There was definitely a quid pro quo on that situation versus, what the conversation took place between the new president and Donald Trump. Notice I don't call Donald Trump the president. That's purposely done.
Well, yeah, it's at this point, I think we're in kind of a de facto light civil war, or the entry of it. That's kind of what I was saying about the mandatory vaccine law. It's hard for me to even call somebody my countryman who believes in eliminating bodily autonomy and forcibly injecting another person's children, for the sake of just virtue signaling on behalf of big pharma. That's what it seems like to me. But and again, that's why I appreciate talking to you, because you have a modicum of seeing both sides and rationality, whereas to somebody who believes that, it's really hard for me to even start a conversation. It's just it devolves immediately into ad hominem and just attacking the other person, because there's no respect on either side. They see us as anti-vaxxers, and I see them as medical fascists. And
Yeah.
but that's again why I'm trying to just, for my own good and for the good of everybody else who I guess is in a similar position, keep the conversation going, because I really refuse to believe that people actually in general are that insane. I think that this is all just basically kind of more of a narrative push that's trying to divide us. And,
So I
it's
think we're touching on a very important point right there, is the fact that this country is being divided. Now, how is this being done? There was was it Scott Adams that called Trump the master persuader? You know,
he did. Yeah.
yeah, I believe it was him, and I don't. I disagree with him wholeheartedly. I don't think he's a master persuader. If you're a master persuader, you cannot have 50% of the country against you, and the only people that are with you is your base. But literally, 50% of the country is against you. So there's definitely a tribal situation over there. It has nothing to do with persuasion or anything like this. I think I've started noticing this taking place between George W. era. This started getting extremely, this agitation between the both sides started getting very extreme at that point, and it's at a point of extreme right now. And I don't understand why they prefer, and when I say they, I don't know who I'm pointing at, but there is a group that prefers the country to be divided. There's blatant evidence out there between choosing sides. You have to choose a side, and this is why I believe Trump makes a very horrible president, because a president is not supposed to be a divider. He's supposed to be a person who unifies. Trump is anything but capable of unifying a country. That I strongly believe in. It will take a charismatic character. I think someone like Ronald Reagan, he lost one state, which was Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. Now, that is a person who understands how to unify a country. That was a master persuader right there. But your thoughts on that?
Well, at one point, Ronald Reagan was also governor of California, and California even voted for him.
Yeah,
California, this used to be quite a different country,
yeah.
just demographically as well as just kind of mentally and psychologically. A lot of things have happened, and a lot of the things that happen, there's purposeful dividing, right? And then there's also just the general trauma of the news cycle, and like, from 9/11 to the school shootings and just, even just natural disasters and type things, Fukushima, right? People start to almost get, desensitized to it. And I feel like then they just kind of, it's only when people are in a fear state, an agitated anxiety state, that they'll just be led somewhere new, like, because, they're just looking for someone to hopefully relieve that anxiety, right? And yeah, I mean, I agree that presidents should do what they can to unite the country. Again, my perspective is that I feel like Trump has done a pretty good job at trying to do that. Does he antagonize individuals? Yes, but almost universally, there he's responding to people who antagonize him, and there's certain aspects to it that it goes beyond the incompetent, and it's full on into the deep end of evil, right? Of things like the Charlottesville, right? This was, right, it originally was a debate over a statue, right, of the Robert E. Lee, I think it was Robert E. Lee, some Confederate statue. And, people wanted it taken down. Others didn't want it taken down. That was the original debate. And then all these just like, like just crazy right wing, I don't even want to call them right wing basically, but they're like the new American, National Socialists and whatnot. And they showed up, and I personally believed a lot of that was staged myself. Basically even the person, Jason Kessler, who organized it, was like a Occupy Wall Street guy.
Yeah.
He's a leftist, and basically all that aside, there were there were good people, right, debating over whether or not a statue should be taken down. And Trump, in his speech immediately after that in August of 2017, comes out and says, basically, there were good people on both sides of the statue debate. I'm not talking about the the supremacists or whatnot. I'm not talking about them. They should be condemned. Absolutely, those were his words. I'm
So,
paraphrasing a little bit, but those were his words. He was very, very explicit about what his meaning was. And the media, very many people in the media, even like anchors and stuff, they will continually report it as if that was the day that Trump endorsed racism and white, nationalism and whatnot. It's absolutely a lie. There's no way.
I
And Scott Adams, he's not a right winger by any means.
no.
He's very much on both sides, and I
Yeah.
enjoy listening to him, every once in a while. But he'll drive that point home that if you're going to really take Trump down for something, make it be something true, because otherwise you just look like a crazy person and a liar and more evil than he is. That's my perspective, is if you're going to take him down, it's got to be with the truth.
And that's what I'm saying. Trump knows how to create these. Well, I don't know if Trump creates it or not. So this is where I'm divided whether he's a master genius or not. But these tiny little situations are created where the left gets extremely hyped up against something that there really isn't there. For example, this Ukraine situation. There's really nothing there, but these little battles that are given to Trump, and as long as he's winning these little battles, he's just putting another victory on his notch. And to go back to what I was saying about Trump not trying to unify the country, I don't know whether he is trying or not trying. I think he is just incapable. It takes a certain type of charismatic human being to be able to unify a country as diverse and as big as this. And this is why, again, why I believe he doesn't become a good president is because he doesn't have that characteristic. He's not capable of such a large task ahead of him, because this country is divided in two. And, the old saying goes, anything divided in two cannot stand. It's definitely we're imploding within ourselves in this country. And I don't see anybody on the new candidates that that kind of stick out to be that person to unify the country. So I think we're going to go another decade or so of this. Hopefully it doesn't cause a major civil war. I do believe there is like you said, a sort of like a mini civil war that's happening within this country. Little sections of it here and there.
Well, I think we've come to the point where there's just fundamentally different values altogether, right? Back in the days of Reagan, there could be a persuasion to the entire country because people all had the same values on the right
Yeah.
and the left, right? Nobody was out there saying we need to destroy capitalism and we need to take away all the guns and basically we need to give free healthcare to illegal aliens, right? Nobody was saying like that. You would have been called a Soviet back then. Basically that there was like, the collapse of political socialism led to the rise of like cultural socialism, cultural Marxism, as they call it. And it's not even necessarily an entire argument per se at a certain point for socialism. It's just like the aggregated feelings of people that everybody should be equal, therefore we need to use the machine of the state to make everyone equal in outcome, not in opportunity but in outcome. And that, it's like there's even what was the law that was passed, I think a year or two ago here in California, where every publicly traded company in the state of California by law has to have a female board member.
I remember that. Yeah.
And it's like I'll cap that off and let you go. But just like for me, if I were a woman and I were a businesswoman and I had fought my way to get to the top, and then I was given the position just like because I was the token female, like because they were forced by law to give me that seat, I just don't feel like that would be rewarding at all. I feel like that would almost be an insult, if anything. But
I agree with you 100% on that. And I think that's the insanity that's breaking this country apart. The question is, we're pointing out very surface level problems by not understanding what the core problem is. From my thought process, the core problem is there is a group of individuals that are trying to keep this country divided, or they have a certain agenda that they want to push forward. Now, I don't know if these are the socialists or these are the populists, or it could be anybody. This is the best way to get an agenda across, is to divide a country. I think as far as the citizens of this country, if they're able to understand what's happening right in front of their eyes, that they are being divided, and some of the choices and conversations that have been taking place, some of the laws that have been passed, like the one you mentioned, whether it's the vaccination or the board member, a female board member in every company, every publicly traded company in California. These things are insanity. There's no questions about it. But why are we falling to these tricks? Why are we? Is it because simply just to be against the other side? And who is the other side? Because whether you're a liberal, right wing, left wing, whatever you are, you're still an American. And a lot of people have forgotten that.
I would 100% agree. And, I would say that basically a lot of people don't actually see themselves as American. They actually reject that title, and they see the American flag as a hate symbol, right? They see that almost the same as a German National Socialist flag. And so that's again, how do you persuade to an entire country when not half, but a significant component of the country literally hates the country? There's really no way to persuade to both sides because it's either or. There aren't fundamentally similar values for Antifa. Actually, the funny thing is the far right wing, neo-national socialists and Antifa actually have more in common than probably most other segments of the country. It's just that basically they're looking at it from nominally different ends, but they both believe in using basically force to control people. They both believe in basically sacrificing people for the good of the state as long as it's their version of a state, whether it's an ethno state or a communist socialist utopia, whatnot. Whereas I think the common values of classical liberalism that you and I are very conversant with is basically, hey, we can have different opinions, but I'm never going to force anything on you, right? This is a free country, right? We can debate about speech and guns and whatnot, but I'm never going to basically, advocate for you to be for cops to come into your home and take things from you, right? But there are a lot of people now that are in that mentality of they see it as a zero-sum game of I need to take from the other side, and that's the only way I can get anything. And capitalism in its real form is not a zero-sum game. It can be very much win-win. Not all forms of capitalism are that. There's a parasitic capitalism, and I think a lot of what we have is that parasitic capitalism. But entrepreneurship down here at the ground level, that's win-win. If I didn't get something from transacting with you and you didn't get something from me, then we wouldn't make the transaction. That's the nature of commerce, right? But when the government gets involved, it's all right, this is your only option. And if you don't like it, you're going to jail. And if you resist, then we're going to shoot you. And that's a problem when people adapt that as their language, right? Not just a political belief one way or the other, but that's their language of force.
And I think Malcolm X had a saying that the chickens will come home to roost or something like that. I think that's a very telling statement. I think we might very well be paying for the sins of our past, and there are many. When you say people don't like this country, they're against the flag and these and yes, you're right. I've seen it plenty of time, and once information was available via internet, it was available for everybody to do their own research. I think we started losing trust in our country after the Vietnam War. That was a very it was a very there was a lot of lies that went with that war, especially from the side of the government.
Well, so and of course, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I mean, the Vietnam War, really took off after a certain president was assassinated in Dallas, right? Kennedy basically, that in 1963, he said, I'm going to have all the troops, maybe, I don't know if he was talking about 1963 or talking about 1964, but he said, I'm going to have all the troops home by Christmas. And he fully intended to do that. He
I
also said things like, "I'm going to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces" after the
right,
Bay of Pigs. Right? The Bay of Pigs was not just a ooh, whoops, a mulligan. Oh, we messed it up. It was a deliberate sabotage, right?
absolutely
By the CIA and the Dulles brothers against Kennedy.
right.
And this whole thing was a deliberate sabotage of his presidency. And he was like, you sons of bitches, I'm going to take you all out." And, unfortunately, they got to him first, as many people believe. And even in the wake of it, I mean, we're talking about like 70-80% of the country, nobody believed in the single lone nut gunman shooter. And it's funny now, 2/3 of people in this country don't believe that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. It's just funny how over time they implement this narrative, and if nobody really challenges it, and it doesn't like fully officially out in the open get knocked out, then they just assume that that's the truth. I mean,
Yeah.
with the same thing with a lot of things today, from 9/11 and a lot of other major events. It's just like it doesn't matter how many legitimate questions there are, they just railroad us all with this media and just say, "Well, nope, that's the official story. Moving on now. News at 11. There's a bunny stuck in a well, and here's a kid with chocolate all over his face." And it's like,
Yeah.
and off we go down the memory hole. And
And
it's
that's
just,
what I mean. With all of these lies that have been told to the American people, and right now with information being so available, people tend to not believe their country. They don't tend to believe these people who are in power. To go back to the Iraq War, for example, a blatant lie to get into that war. I don't know if you remember how the news was being presented at that time. It was, every time they would launch an attack, the newscasters will, talk about they would talk about the missiles that were used as if they were, they were, advertising these missiles and everything like that. So I tend to lean towards there is a shadow government. That government is the military industrial complex. And I think that's what, if you look at it in a military terms, as long as you keep the people divided, everything will be fine for them. So, in a sense, if I was to point my finger one direction, and even most recently with Trump selling the military equipment to Saudi Arabia, I mean, you saw how he was talking about this was worth $500 billion. This is such and such. He was making the same advertising for the for the missiles and everything like that. So this is why I do believe he's no different than anybody else, and I do believe he's also an agent of war, even though you could tell he plays a different part. But I do believe he is a different, another agent of the military-industrial complex. I do believe that's the main cause of all of these things happening. I know it's a little bit of a rabbit hole for me to end up all the way out there, but
well, that's one of the things about these rabbit holes and the whole thing of conspiracy theorist is like at a certain point, it would be one thing if like we were, theorizing about all this and there weren't like, this mass history of bloodshed and warfare all over the world. But the fact is these things did happen and the
yeah,
proof was never revealed. So
right.
at what point are we supposed to just like, either start asking questions and pick up the pitchforks and torches, or just resign that we are slaves, we're just cattle being ruled by our masters, and just like, keep chewing the cud and move on, right? Because I mean, I agree that Trump has been a fantastic salesman for the military industrial complex. Being an agent of them and an agent of the shadow government is kind of a separate question in my mind. But, for me, he has to keep Israel happy. He has to keep the military industrial complex happy, because if he doesn't, he gets Kennedied, right?
Yeah,
And Kennedy went, that's exactly one of the reasons why Kennedy got
yeah.
Kennedy. He went against Israel, he went against the MIC.
I
And
think I
that's
think
too much
too.
for anybody to take. Trump's already taken on enough power structures within the government. He already has enough people hating him. If he had everybody hating him, that's when a coup happens. It doesn't matter who you are or how powerful you think you are. If you don't have any support, you're gonna get hit. And that's and he knows. I think he has a well enough conception of the shadow government, the deep state, that from the very beginning, that's basically been his plan. I'm going to keep these pigs as happy as they can be. I'm gonna basically just do everything I can for Israel and Saudi Arabia and the military industrial complex, and maybe underneath that cover I can get something meaningful done for the American people. And I think he's gotten some meaningful things done, but at the same time, ideologically, I wish he would be a lot better. I don't agree with everything he says by any means, but when I judge him by his actions, not based on his words. And I think a lot of people, both on the right and the left, they absolutely hate the man because they judge him on his words. And I think he uses words strategically to, again, it's 5D chess. He's trying to basically maneuver situations, and he's not always successful. It hasn't led to the ultimate victory for everything that he's wanted. So he's a mortal man. I would say he does have persuasion ability. I don't know if I'd call him the master persuader per se, but he's still alive at least, and his support has miraculously gone up despite unrelenting bombardment by the media. And I just the thing, I guess, returning back to the political thing with the Democrats and whatnot, why I wish that there were more sensible Democrats, because I'd like Trump to be pulled more towards a sensible center, right? The more that his opposition looks completely batshit insane, he believes that he can get away with things, and so he doesn't have to hold to that America First philosophy, which I agree with. If you're the leader of the America, you should be doing what you can for America, not for all the countries of the world. If we can help people here and there, that's one thing, authorized by Congress, but it's not the president's job to help everybody in the world. That's not their job at all. But Trump, at a certain point, the less secure that he feels in his position, the more that he, has to pander to these forces. And, I just don't know, because there's a reason that all of these, Tulsi Gabbard is a rational candidate and she gets support, but not very much. So, I mean, what am I to conclude except that the other side is actually going crazy? Like, they're actually becoming full on communists. Right. And again, you even see the Labour Party in the UK. They're basically calling each other comrade and whatnot and saying we need to socialize everything. They're literally going full commie, like Soviet commie, which I would consider to be even farther than the democratic socialism, when you're actually calling for state control over all industries. That's pretty out there.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't. I definitely don't lean on that. But to go back to what you were saying, let me start from the beginning. The Kennedy effect. I think if you don't go in the mindset of the Kennedy sacrifice, you're not going to get anything done. You might get sacrificed, but in order to change something this big, to keep pleasing certain people to get things done, you're just another brick in the wall, I guess. It doesn't make you're part of the swamp. You kind of have to, let me please this to get this done. Let me please this to get that done. And you only have 4 years, maybe 8, who knows? Then you're gone. But all these other industries that you helped out, they just became that much more powerful. So and this is what I mean, that you have to be willing to take the Kennedy sacrifice. Even though I'm sure if Kennedy knew what was coming to him, I doubt he would. Who knows? I shouldn't. It's tough to say, but he will. You're right. He did step up to the powers at B, and he did say, "I'm going to break these things into pieces," and that's what happened to him. But if we had another Kennedy and another Kennedy and another Kennedy that followed, we would have been in a different place. But that's the ultimate sacrifice of a leader. But to not be that extreme, because I am extreme. When I think of these things, I always go super extreme. No matter what, things like this Ukraine event that's happening to Trump, all of these little things that they make an elephant out of, these things only help Trump. That's why his popularity keeps creeping up, because they're small battles. As long as you're winning small battles, you're going to win the big war. And he's going to win the election. Unfortunately, I have a lot of money betting against it. And now I am so,
Yeah, time to flip that.
yeah, so I have to hedge my bet now. I got to find the other side. But yeah, no. At this point, you asked me in the beginning what I think of this Ukraine situation. It's complete insanity, and it's simply because the other side has lost their mind completely, and they're just handing the presidency back to the same man in a silver platter. And by all means, it is what it is.
And you made some really good points there, and I definitely just I agree in principle with the whole point that you have to really, to get anything done in this world, it's got to be ride or die. Basically, like it's a game of chicken half the time in life, just
Yeah.
basically who's going to blink first. And in order to basically win, you have to basically just you go, and sometimes the other guy may not blink first, and then you collide. And that's, but you have to be willing to take that risk, and it's only somebody who has ironclad principles and a spiritual foundation that is able to undertake those things. And I don't necessarily think that Trump is that guy, but I feel like he has some sort of spirituality just based on his actions. Again, not his words, but I think that's more of a recent development in his life. I think that he spent most of his years just kind of as a New York playboy, towing around with all these people, high class people, including the Clintons, including Epstein, and all these people. And my personal reading of it with all that is that at some point he saw something that really disgusted him. That because he's not a drunk. He's never been. Supposedly he's never drunk alcohol, right? He likes his steak. He likes his ice cream. He likes money. He likes gold, right? He's got his flaws, but he's not like he's not a human trafficker as far as I can tell. He's never been engaged in that. I mean, he's got some creepy things. Okay, I know about the pageants and whatnot, and some of the creepy comments and whatnot. Creepy comments doesn't equal like an evil person. It's just kind of a pervy type guy, and but it's I don't know where all this leads. I just know that basically, again, we have to keep the conversation going, because if they let this become the default narrative, then we've pretty much lost already. And I don't think that's going to happen. But at the same time, again, there are many people who are supporting absolute, straight up, the Cory Bookers and Bernie Sanders and whatnot, getting rid of all private insurance, basically taking guns, right? Beto O'Rourke, it, it's amazing to me how a guy can lose like like a race for Senate and then somehow get catapulted into the race for presidency. It's almost like they just basically run people and get them into the spotlight so that they can run them for the presidency. It doesn't matter about their merits or anything, but it
Right.
just again illustrates how orchestrated this all is. For so many decades, for how many years have we just had a selection process where they just offer us up, Coke and Pepsi? And I don't think that Trump was part of that. I think, if anything, Hillary wanted to run against him because she thought it would be easy, and it didn't turn out to be as easy as she thought. And then it totally backfired on a lot of people. But
You are absolutely right about that part about Hillary wanting him to run against him. But I do have a question for you, and this goes to most Trump supporters. When Trump was running against Hillary, I would ask people why they voted for Trump. A lot of people that I know, a lot of, and I'm not sure if you have or not, but a lot of good people that I know, and amazing, smart people. I asked, why did you vote for Trump? And they would say, well, look at the alternative. Do you really want crooked Hillary to be your president? I had no answer to that. I totally agree with that. Well, I was baffled that it was those were the only two alternatives. Then there's something systemically wrong with this country. But let's put that part away. Let's say, okay, now I understand why you voted for Trump, because the alternative was just no good. I agree with that. Right now, you don't have that alternative. Would you still vote for Trump, and why?
Well, at least back then, and I really wanted Bernie Sanders to be the nominee because I really wanted the election to be kind of a referendum on socialism versus capitalism. I was really stoked for that to happen and have that whole national debate, and maybe that's what'll come out of this, although I'm not as optimistic as I was back then that, oh, we'll all just have a nice debate.
Yeah.
Right? But I would say yes. Again, based on his actions, I'm still in support of him. I think a lot of the things he says are very dubious. Red flag laws, I am not really I can't entertain for more than just a few seconds, except as just an academical hypothetical thing because you
What's
know
that? I'm sorry.
what
The,
red flag laws.
yeah.
So this was basically after the last kind of recent shootings, right, a month or two ago, and he came out and said, basically, video games, violent video games, and all this media programming, and we need to have the means to take guns away from people who have been identified as a threat, right? And so it's this idea that somebody, a family member or law enforcement can, give a red flag for somebody, and then that allows the police to go and forcibly take their guns away as a like a pre-crime, like Minority Report type thing of
Yeah.
we think you're going to commit a crime, therefore take the guns. And you know, th- it's hard to imagine making more laws would make things better when you see things like Parkland, where the police literally went to the kid's house like dozens of times. The FBI even talked to the kid, and nothing happens. And it's interesting with the FBI. Almost most of the shooters in this country, the FBI just kind of mysteriously talks to in the months before it happens, and for months
Very
before, and then
strange.
and then it's like, oh, sorry, we just dropped the ball. It's like, are you really dropping the ball, or do you have something to do with this? I have to wonder at a certain point.
Very strange. I agree on that one. There's a lot of strange situations that just don't add up. A lot of things in 9/11 just don't add up to me, to be honest with you. There's a lot of these, the Kennedy situation, that doesn't add up. But the question is why? Who are they? What do they want? You know?
Well, and what's interesting to ponder is that, right, it wasn't just John F. Kennedy, it was his brother Bobby, right? And they
Yeah.
were kind of two on a team. And
Yeah.
Bobby, it's interesting just to look at where we are today. And one of the only people with any public name whatsoever who is fighting this vaccine fight on the behalf of the parents against this media, this just unrelenting narrative of vaccines are safe and effective. Oh, yeah, don't worry about that vaccine court and the $4 billion paid out in settlements and the fact that only 1% of adverse events even get reported to the system, right? Just don't worry about all that. Safe and effective, quote, trademark, copyright, right? The only person who's really standing up for us is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is Bobby Kennedy's son, right? And
Really?
it's the lines have not changed. It's that basically there's people who believe that we are their chattel slaves and we exist just to make them money and serve their whims, and basically and then there's basically people who think that people deserve to have a modicum of sovereignty and autonomy, and we don't have the right to throw them into the wood chipper like that.
You know
And
what?
it was the Kennedys then, it's the Kennedys now.
Th- th-
They may be promiscuous, but they're good people.
th- th- this is why I do like the Kennedy family is that they understand the Kennedy sacrifice very well, and they won't stop. They keep talking about the things that they truly believe in and are willing to take very well. If anyone understands the Kennedy sacrifice, they do, and they're willing to stand up for it still today, which is very strange, honorable. I don't understand it, I guess, but I get it, you know?
Well, the top video on our channel is about Mr. George Bush Sr. and John F. Kennedy, and basically, I talk a little bit in that video about the many curious connections between George Bush Sr. and the Kennedy assassination, and all the things that have happened since then. So, if you haven't watched that one, that's I put links in the description below to the books that I read and kind of put that together. That was back when I was smoking joints on camera too and doing my videos with a joint in my hand. But yeah, basically I'm glad we had this talk. We're getting up there, so basically we'll kind of wrap it up. But I'd
Yeah.
like to get more into the habit of doing this. Now that I got the setup, I think that this is all working. I don't think we've had any technical difficulties just yet. I think we're audio and video is coming through, but again, I think that there's so much bullshit out there. It would be good for us as well as all the listeners and viewers out there to basically, even if Google is censoring this channel and we're only going to get a few hundred views, you know, it's putting it out into the ether and letting them know that, hey, you can keep blasting that air horn, but we're just going to put earmuffs on and start hand signaling in rational speech to each other, right? It's like whatever, even if we have to basically completely shut out the media, and just talk amongst ourselves and just bypass all that. I think that's what we got to do in order to stay sane and just make it through this storm of nonsense and propaganda.
I agree. I think it's very important to actually try to woke has a bad connotation these days. I get it, but people do need to wake up. They need to understand that they shouldn't be against each other. This is a game played by somebody, and we are falling right into it. And I think as long as there's conversations like this, and no matter who listens to it, how many listen to it, I think eventually, hopefully, something good would come out of it. And besides that, I really enjoy having our conversation. So I would like to keep doing this as much as possible.
For sure. Well, thanks for coming on, Joe. It's been nice talking to you. And yeah, basically, let me know your availability, and we'll hopefully try and set up something on a recurring basis and keep this running.
Sounds good.
All right. Take it easy, brother, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks, bud. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.